Welcome to the ECE Classroom podcast with your host, SusieBeghin, inspiring early childhood educators every day. Hello and welcome back to the ECE Classroom, the podcast where we dive deep into the world of early childhood education, parenting tips, and creative learning strategies. I'm your host, SusieBeghin, and today we have a very special guest with us. She's joining us from ABC See, Hear, Do. Her name is Stefanie Hohl. Welcome to the show, Stefanie.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
So tell us a little bit about yourself, your company, and what you do.
Yeah, so I publish educational learn-to-read books for kids that use movement to teach reading. So it breaks learning to read down into really simple steps. It makes it super fun and active, and it just allows a lot more kids to access learning to read in a fun and easy way. I am from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. I have 5 kids. We're out of the house now, which is just mind-blowing to me. And I have way too many pets. And yeah, I'm just really passionate about literacy and helping kids learn to read and all those good things.
Oh, that's awesome. I mean, I absolutely am attracted to everything that you had to say. So I'm a big believer in hands-on play to learn.
Yeah.
You know, literacy, doesn't matter what you're learning, whether it's science or literacy, if it's done through play, it's definitely more effective. So tell me a little bit about how our listeners here are educators, mostly early childhood educators. So they would be teaching, children 6 and under. And of course, they're very energetic, right? So
Yes.
tell my educators, how can they harness that energy, that children's natural energy and movement to support early reading?
Yeah, so I think a lot of times people don't think about adding playful movement into learning to read. I feel like often that's thought of as like, everyone sit down and be quiet and sit still while we learn our letters or we practice reading words, which is actually really unfortunate because kids learn best when they're moving. Like research shows this over and over that kids need to move. And so if teachers can think of ways to incorporate movement to whatever they're teaching, it's going to be more effective. So like my learn to read books add a hand gesture for each letter sound. So for example, C, you're curling your hands like claws and scratching for the cat and saying k, k. And A, you're going ah. So they're moving their body in relation to each specific sound. So you can do that where you're adding a specific motion for each concept you're trying to teach. Or if that's too complicated or hard to think of, you can add movement, like just a general movement to teaching. So, if your students are learning letter sounds or whatever, they could just be doing movements as simple as tapping their fingertips or hopping on one foot or tapping their knee. Like just adding in any movement is going to be helpful because often kids, like they seem really fidgety. So if you can harness that fidgetiness and use it to your advantage, that's going to help them learn and remember what you're trying to teach them. And it's going to keep them more engaged and paying attention as well.
Yeah. I remember back in the day when I was teaching my little one, he's 21 years old now.
Yeah.
But back then I came across this phonics program that was using movement to teach the letter sounds. And we would do activities like hop on the letter. So I'd have these little cards of letters like on the floor and I would just ask them to hop to the letter. Like I'd say, hop to the letter A, let's hop to the letter S, whatever,
Yeah, that's exactly it. And we have tons of ideas like that on our website for free. That's just playful ways to incorporate these things. So like you said, like maybe if they're learning sight words, you can put them on the ground and they hop to each one and say that word. Or putting flashcards up on the wall and have them throw a crumpled up piece of paper at it, and whichever one they hit, that's the sound they have to make. Things like that where like thinking outside the box a little bit to get these kids moving in whatever way you can.
When we actually get to books, do you still suggest, letter sounds is pretty straightforward, but what about when they're actually like have a book in their hand? Do you actually encourage movement at that point as well?
So my early readers, so each level in my program has a early reader. And so like we provide hints, like the animal action that they're supposed to do for each letter sound, because that builds a lot of confidence when kids are learning to read. And I have a lot of parents who are like, oh, well, are they going to be like moving their arms the rest of their lives while they're reading? And like, no, they're not going to do that. As soon as it clicks and they get it, they don't have to do the movements anymore when they're reading. So if you have a child that's a reluctant reader, I often recommend audiobooks where they can be moving or doing something else while they're listening. Because a lot of kids do have a really hard time just sitting still and reading a book.
Mm-hmm.
So, for example, if they're listening to an audiobook, maybe they're bouncing on a ball while they listen to it, or maybe they're taking a walk or jumping on the trampoline. A lot of times adding that movement helps them be able to focus so that they can actually like listen to the story. If you're doing a read aloud for, preschool age children, I always recommend trying to incorporate movement there. And that just usually goes along with whatever book you're reading. If the book says, they jumped, whatever, have the kids get up and jump. Or, oh, they were looking for so and so, have them like do the looking. However you can do it, that's going to add a lot more engagement, and the kids will learn it and remember it better. As they progress in their reading and are reading actual books themselves, there's not as much movement there because often that's hopefully they're imagining it in their head and they're not needing to move their bodies as much at that point. But there's a lot of kids who don't like to read because they don't want to sit still. So again, yeah, that's when I would recommend trying the audiobooks for an
Mm-hmm.
active, wiggly child.
That sounds like a good idea. I have a workshop that I do where we teach educators how to make story kits.
Mm,
So it really makes that read aloud, story time a lot more interactive.
I love that.
So we do things like, we create puppets or we create
Mm,
props that go with the stories. And then when we're reading the story, we're not just reading the words on the page, we're pretty much acting them out with the
oh, I love
props.
that. Yeah.
So it encourages that movement. So that's definitely something that I think would go along with the strategies you're talking
Yeah,
about.
that's
It's
a great
just,
idea.
yeah.
Totally.
Yeah. So what simple developmentally appropriate strategies can educators use in the classroom to foster those foundational reading skills just through their everyday play and their routines? Can you think of some ways they can do that?
Yeah, so I am a big believer in incorporating literacy into everything. So, for example, in a preschool classroom, something as simple as when the kids line up to go somewhere, if you can somehow incorporate letters into that, like, okay, we're going in alphabetical order, or whoever's name starts with the letter S gets to lead the line today, and what sound does S make, and you practice the sound. So just like taking those little moments, to kind of create this literacy rich world for them, I think is huge, because a lot of kids just need a lot of reinforcement. And so the more places they're getting that in different ways, it's going to connect to different parts of their brain and different ways to remember it. And that's going to help. Even if you have like play-based centers set up, throw foam letters in there just so they're manipulating them and holding them and whatever they're playing with. Any way you can just get those letters or words in there, I think is helpful.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. I think that we need to incorporate literacy into every part of our day. And, if we can incorporate letters when we're outside, when we're,
Mm-hmm.
doing sensory play, that's definitely, going to increase their comfort level. And I think
Mm-hmm.
they're not going to be as resistant to reading when they're constantly seeing letters, in a
Right.
playful way, right?
Right. And I think some of that pressure is removed. Like outside, yeah, if you find like a stick and maybe it's curved and you're like, oh, what letter does this look like? Where it's just something playful. Oh, how do we make a T out of these sticks? And there's not like that pressure of the classroom that kids sometimes feel. So I think
Hmm.
that can help and make a big difference too.
Yeah. And I love what you said about the lining up. I was thinking in my head when you were saying that everybody has like a first letter of their name, right? And you said that you incorporate some kind of a movement with that
Mhm.
letter. So if every student would know, their first letter and know their action.
Mhm.
So when they line up, they do their action.
Yeah.
Okay, so if they start with a C, they have the cuss sound, so they'd
Hmm.
be the scratching cat. Give me some other examples of other kinds of movements for the letters. I don't want you to give it all
Yeah.
away, but give me a few.
Yeah, no, they're super fun. So like P is a porcupine, kind of like that popping sound. M is rubbing your belly like you ate something yummy with a monkey and saying, mm. So I try to make the sounds kind of intuitive. S is, which is actually a salamander because snakes don't have hands. So sound. And what's another fun one? Turtle is tap the air. So just fun
Yeah.
things like that.
And so if they could all know their own letter,
Hmm.
when they line up, they can make the sound of their letter.
Yeah,
And
that
then
would
they'd
be.
really get to know it, especially because you line up or you transition so often that they'd really get to know their first letter of their name real quick.
Yes, they would. They would. That
Yeah.
would be really fun.
Yeah, that sounds good. Okay. What are your favorite ways to make early reading experiences fun and inclusive, especially for children, like you said, that may be really hesitant, especially children with exceptionalities, different kinds of concerns where they
Right.
may not take to it very well?
Well, this is where the movement really helps, especially like neurodivergent kids, because often their brains just work differently. And it's not that they can't learn it, it just needs to be accessed through a different part of their brain. And adding in the movement actually uses more of their brain than just seeing and hearing. And so it just creates all these extra neural pathways and connections, which is what allows it to be easier. I'm a big proponent of making learning to read fun, making everything fun, because I think at, below age 6, trying to get kids to like sit down, sit still, be quiet is very challenging. And it takes a lot of energy for them to actually do that, which takes away their energy from actually learning. So, like on our website, there's tons of these ideas too, like sensory activities. Anytime they can be like manipulating something is great. Playing games, taking it outside, doing crafts, any way you can use different senses, different games, activities to get them engaged, get them interested, making it fun. That's going to help all kids, but it's especially going to help those kids with maybe harder reading challenges because it's just going to allow them to access it in a different way.
We've been talking a lot about educators, and I know we have some listeners who are also parents. So, can we just switch gears a little bit and talk about parents and how they can be a part of this process as well, and what they can do to encourage your children
Yeah.
to learn?
Yeah, absolutely. So a lot of parents, feel like, oh, my child will learn to read in school. Like, I don't need to worry about that. But I just think that's sad because the more parents can help at home, the better start their child's going to have when they start school. And because reading is necessary for everything. And if your child is a strong reader, everything in school is going to be easier. And if
So
your
true.
child struggles to read, it makes school so hard. Like it makes math hard. It makes every subject just that much more difficult. So I'm a huge proponent of parents giving their kids a head start. And I think a lot of parents feel overwhelmed by that, but it can be as simple as like working on it for 1 minute a day. Like that's what I say. Before bedtime, 1 minute. Just go over one letter sound. Go over one sight word. And over time, that is going to build up and make a huge difference, in the 2 to 3 years leading up to kindergarten. It's going to give your child a huge head start. And, the more parents want to do, great, but it can be really simple. It can just even be incorporated into your day. Like when you're driving down the street and you see a stop sign, oh, look, that's the letter S. It says S. That took what, 10 seconds? Because there are words and letters all around us. And so just making your child aware of that and reinforcing those things, even like on the cereal box, Cheerios, oh, that's the CH. You put those together and it makes the ch sound. Just reinforcing that as much as you can is really helpful.
Yeah, I love incorporating that into just everyday life. Parents can easily do that. That doesn't take any extra effort, just to point out letters they see or words they see, common words like stop, things like that. How do you feel about worksheets? How do you feel about, I feel like parents often, when they think of ABCs, they go and buy that preschool workbook and work through the letters. Okay, today we're going to work on the letter A, trace the letter A, right? And then they just keep grilling their kids. How do you feel about that? How do you feel about, paper and pen?
I'm definitely not anti that because I think some kids are drawn to that and love it, and that's great. But there's a lot of kids that hate it. And so I think in those situations, you just need to be like aware of how your child's responding to it, because it's really easy to get frustrated if you're like, oh, I bought this workbook, we're going to do 1 page a day. And then your child's just like refusing or crying or fighting or running away. Like that's obviously not the right fit for them.
Right.
Okay. So then in that situation, it's like, okay, let's try something else. Let's try a sensory box instead. Or let's try going outside and running around while we look at flashcards or whatever. There's going to be some kids you hand the workbook to and they do the whole thing that day because they just love that type of activity. So I think it's just parents being aware of where their child is and what their child needs and not feeling like defeated or like they failed if their child doesn't like a worksheet, because kids they're just all over the place, totally different types of learners. And it's not that your child failed or isn't smart or whatever, they just need to learn in a different way. And so I always want to tell parents, like, meet your child where they are instead of where you think they should be, right?
Yes, that's good advice. I have a lot of contact with parents in the work that I do, and I do feel that, they do put a lot of pressure on kids to learn in a certain way, in the way that they think that they should learn. Like you said, they'll take out the one page and say, "Oh, my child won't do this, they're falling behind." Meanwhile, they just haven't maybe approached the right way that that child learns.
Right. And that's hard for parents to learn. Like my oldest, my daughter, I didn't know what I was doing back then. She's 21 now, and I thought she should learn the way I wanted her to learn. And we had fight after fight after fight, and it was horrible. And from that experience with each kid, I learned, oh, let's try it, differently. And so by the time I got to my last child, that's why I actually developed my Learn to Read program, because I was like, I am not fighting with him every day.
Yes,
And he will not sit still. So I need something better for him.
I had
So,
this. That sounds like my story. I had the exact same experience with my oldest child. I thought, like I said, I thought I should have him sit down and do work right at the
mm-hmm.
table. And I quickly realized that that was just a fight,
Yep.
waiting to happen. And, there was other ways. Now, I didn't know the other ways. And
Right.
then when I finally learned them, it was like, okay, now this works, right?
Well, and that's what's so hard because that's how we were taught. And so in our minds,
Yes.
that's what learning looks like. And
Yeah.
so sometimes it's hard to like give yourself permission to let it look different.
Yes. And sometimes it's just not knowing what to do, right? Like, how
Mm-hmm.
do you incorporate that movement? And maybe
Right.
that's why programs like yours are good to help people to know, well, here's ideas, right?
Right.
Tell me a little bit about that. Tell me about, what do you offer? What's free? What's,
Yeah. Yeah.
and all
So
of
our
that.
series has 7 books in the series: uppercase letters, lowercase, and then blended beginning sounds, blended ending sounds, long vowel sight words, and irregular sounds. So it's broken into really simple steps so your child they'll be like second grade reading level by the time they're done with the program. And then we offer supplemental materials like coloring books, writing. But with those, again, I say only buy those if that's what your child likes. If your child hates to color, don't waste your money on that. Some
Yeah.
kids love to color, some hate it. And then we have the early readers, because most early readers are actually way too hard for kids. So our early readers only use words that they have learned to read in that level. And so it builds a lot of confidence. And they're like, oh, I can read this whole book by myself. I want to keep reading. Whereas a lot of early readers, they're like, I can't read these words. It's frustrating. I don't like this. It's not fun. I don't want to read. And
Exactly.
so the whole point of my program was to really build confidence in kids as readers. And then we also offer flashcards and curriculum books for the first 2 levels, like if you want to have a more structured like circle time type of thing or do all these supplemental activities. And then our website, we have tons and tons of free ideas of like, you can just go on there and be like, we're working on letter A this week, and here's a list of all these fun games and sensory and crafts to do, and it gives you all those ideas. We also have other freebies on there, like bingo games you can print out and play, stuff like that. So there's just a lot of fun stuff on there. Our Instagram, we post tons of letter learning ideas. Because obviously you don't have to buy my books to add in movement to teach your kids. But if you're one of those people that's like, I don't have the brain power to think of these ideas on my own, it's like I just wanted to make it as simple as possible for parents to just pick up the book and use it right away. Like you don't need training, you don't need any prep. Because, I had 5 kids. I'm like, I get it. I was in the trenches. I know what parents need.
Yes.
So yeah,
Yeah.
that's the program.
I really like what you said about the early success. You have your own kind of books that you developed based on where they're at in their ability to read. And I do agree that a lot of those learn to read books that are out there are just too hard. They're not suitable for starting. And I think, like you
Well,
said, you have to have early success, right? Because children have to see, I can do this, and then they'll like to do
right,
this. But if they
right.
think I can't do this, then they won't like it. And then that creates that whole negative feeling around books
Exactly.
and about reading, right? So that's so true.
Exactly. And every publishing company has different level readers. Like, so a parent going into that, like a level 1 at this publishing company is totally different than a level 1 here. And so it's like, it doesn't actually really mean anything. And you can be like, okay, my kid's starting to read. So you buy a level 1 book and it's actually at like a second grade reading level. And then it's like, what? They can't read this,
Yes.
So I feel bad for parents because it's very hard and confusing to know like what book should my kid be able to read right now and how to
Yeah.
build on that so that they want to read.
Yeah. I love the name of your company, See, Hear, Do. I mean, that really touches on all the different learning styles, right? Visual,
Yep.
auditory, kinesthetic, right? And we know
Yes.
that children need all of those things to be able to learn anything, and reading is no different. And
Mm-hmm.
thanks for bringing to the podcast today that the kinesthetic part is really important to the learning process, and it's not just about seeing and hearing. Thanks for being here today, and tell us where we can find the information on your company.
Yeah, so the website, just abccheredo.com, and same name on all the social media platforms. Our books are also for sale on Amazon, or you can go to any local bookstore and order them there.
Awesome. Okay, and I will have all the links posted in the podcast comments as well. So thanks again for being here, and have a great day.
Thank you. Thanks so much.
Hello, and welcome back. Thanks so much for tuning in today. I hope this episode inspired you to see reading in a whole new way. We talked about how learning to read doesn't have to happen while sitting still at a table. It doesn't need crayons and markers and paper. It can happen through movement, through rhythm, and through play. When we harness children's natural energy, we're actually supporting how their brain learns best, through movement. Try creating movements for each letter sound. Hop on letters. Listen to an audiobook while jumping on the trampoline. These kinds of playful learning experiences in your classrooms help connect the letter sounds to the symbols in a meaningful and powerful way. There's no need for worksheets or pressure, just joyful, active learning that feels natural for kids. And I really love the idea that Stefanie had about using letter sounds when you're lining up. And if you can have each child learn their own letter sound of the first letter of their name and make the sound and the movement as they're lining up, that's a great way to incorporate literacy into routines. And there's so many other ways you can incorporate literacy into your routines, whether it's through sensory play, outdoor play, or even in the washroom. If you've enjoyed this conversation and want even more simple and practical ideas to teach literacy through play, check out my mini course called Teaching Letters with Confidence. It's full of hands-on learning opportunities that you can start using right away with your kids. You'll find the link in the show notes. And don't forget to hit follow and subscribe to this podcast so that you never miss an episode. Until next time, keep learning, keep playing, and have fun. Thanks for tuning in to the ECE Classroom with SusieBeghin. For more information, you can visit our website at www.SusieBeghin.com. Remember to rate, review, and subscribe to our podcast so you can stay up to date on the latest episodes. Thanks for listening.